Good afternoon, friends. I welcome you to this session. In this session we will discuss about free consent. This is the topic of mercantile law, which is part of your course ECO 5 and is given in block 1. As you know that an agreement enforceable by law is a contract, and according to section 10, all agreements are contract if they are made by free consent of parties competent to contract for lawful consideration and with lawful object and are not expressly declared to be void. So free consent is one of the very important element of the contract to be valid. To discuss this, we have with us Professor C.L. Tyagi, who is a very senior and experienced teacher. So I welcome you, sir, and I just request you to start the discussion on the topic free consent.
Well, students, as has been pointed out, section 10 gives the essential elements of a valid contract, and one of the essentials given in that section is free consent. Now, what is consent is defined in section 13. That section lays down free consent. Consent means when two parties, promisor and promisee, are agreeing, thinking in the same sense at the same time. And further, the consent must be free. What is free consent is not actually defined, but it is laid down in section 14 when the consent is not regarded as free. And those elements which vitiate the contract and where there is a flaw in free consent are dealt in section 14. One of them, first law is the coercion, then undue influence, then misrepresentation and fraud, then lastly mistake. We start with the first flaw in consent, that is coercion. Coercion, also known as duress in England, is defined in the section 15 as unlawful detaining or threatening to detain the property of any person or committing any act forbidden by Indian Penal Code or threatening to commit any act forbidden by Indian Penal Code. We take this first one. If the act is forbidden by Indian Penal Code or threatening to commit any act which is forbidden by Indian Penal Code. There are two things in this sentence. First is committing any act forbidden by Indian Penal Code, and secondly threatening to commit those acts which are forbidden. So actually threatening to commit those acts or actually doing those acts which are forbidden by Indian Penal Code will amount to coercion. Second part of the definition says that the unlawful detaining or threatening to detain the property of any person, then here again also it can be broken into two parts. First is the unlawful detaining of a property of any person or threatening to detain the property of any person. If I say to you that okay, I take your watch and say that either you enter into a contract or I am detaining you the property. Why? To compel you that you should make the contract with me. So I am detaining actually. Or if I threaten you that okay, I will seize your goods forcibly and otherwise enter with me in a contract, then it amounts to coercion. To sum up, coercion arises when any one party, the promisee, gives his consent by an act which is forbidden by Indian Penal Code, or when the promisor is threatening to commit any act forbidden by Indian Penal Code, or he is unlawful detaining the property of the promisee or threatening to detain the property of the promisee. The effect of coercion is that the contract is voidable. So long as the other party on whom the coercion has been exercised remains under the power, you can say, of the promisee, then after some time he will be out of that clutches. Then he can he has two options. Either he may say, okay, forget about what is the man has done, I accept the contract. Then the contract will be valid, even though it has been, the consent has been obtained by coercion. Or if he decides, no, I am not bound by the contract, then he can go to the court and the court will set aside the contract. That is the first flaw in a free consent. Second flaw is undue influence. Section 16 lays down that the circumstances when the undue influence is supposed to be exercised. As the two words are there, undue influence, an influence which is undue. Under law, when it is undue, when the relation between the two parties is such that one party is in a position to dominate the will of the other party, and they dominate the will in a way that either he holds a apparent or real authority over the person, or he stands in a fiduciary relation to the other party, or the other party is mentally is so upset that he is bodily or by reason of health or by reason of mental distress or by reason of age, he is not able to think about what should be done. The other party takes the advantage of the situation. I will try to analyze this definition one by one. I am reading it again, this in front of you, which is given. Coercion means that undue influence means when a person, relation between two persons are such that one of the parties is in a position to dominate the will of the other. So note the position, when a person is in the position to dominate the will of the other party and uses that position to obtain an unfair advantage over the other. Now, two things are there in the definition: dominate the will, and secondly, that he wants to dominate over the will to take an advantage of his upper position for making an unfair advantage. So dominating the will, and secondly the intention is to take an unfair advantage. Then the words position to obtain unfair advantage, or we say that he has an authority to dominate over the will. When we will be regarding it that he is able to dominate over the will, the section 15 further laid down that the person will be deemed to dominate the will of another person where he holds a real or apparent authority over the other, or where he stands in a fiduciary relation to other.
It means the relation between the party decides whether there is undue influence or not.
Yes, first of all there must be that relationship.
What
that
type
relationship
of
may be real authority or apparent authority or a fiduciary relationship. Now real or apparent authority shows a relation like husband and wife, or the debtor and creditor. So these are the relations, but all the relations are not such where we will be regarding that there is an undue influence exercised. Fiduciary relation, like directors, they stand in a fiduciary relation with the shareholders.
So one cannot take advantage of just saying that the person has dominated my will and under pressure. The court will see what type of relationship.
Yeah, first they will see what type of relationship is there, and the relationship is such that one party can dominate over the will of the other, like
employer and employee.
Employer and employee, or doctor and patient. Dominate the will to take an unfair advantage. he holds a real or apparent authority over the other or is in a fiduciary position. Second part of this defines that the person whose consent is being taken is mentally so deficient that by reason of age he is very old or ill or physical or mental incapacity, he cannot think, the other party is taking the advantage of such. So therefore, when such situation exists, then the promisee will be forced to enter into a contract. Again the contract is voidable, and the party on whom the undue influence has been exercised, he has the option either to treat the contract valid or to treat the contract as voidable, and court will set aside the contract. In certain cases, the relation between two persons cannot be just regarded as that one is a position to dominate over the will of the other. For example, husband and wife. There, the court will not take it for granted that because husband can dominate over the no. It is not. Certain relations are such where it is regarded that the domination of over the will of the other person does not exist, like in a father and son, or the mother and the daughter, like that. Then the third flaw in
so can we explain also the difference between?
Yeah, we can say the difference, that the difference is maybe we will show to you the differences between the
coercion and
fraud and coercion.
Coercion and undue influence.
Coercion and undue influence. Then this is, first is that relationship between the parties is not necessary in case of coercion. Where it's in the case of undue influence, the relationship must be such which exists between the parties, where secondly, consent is given under the threat of an offence. Offence may be either under IPC or threatening to detain a property. Whereas in case of undue influence, the consent is obtained by dominating over the will of the other person. And lastly, in case of coercion, physical force may be used or a threat may be used, whereas in case of undue influence, moral pressure is exercised. Again, so we can say that undue influence is a relationship is to be established. In case of coercion, relationship between the two parties is not to be is not to exist. Then in case of coercion, the act is done which is criminal under Indian Penal Code, or threatening to detain, where that is a force is used. Whereas in case of undue influence, a moral pressure is used. That is the difference between the two variables which are undue influence and coercion, which vitiate the contract and the consent is not free. Then we pass on to the third one, that is the fraud and misrepresentation. Now we first say misrepresentation. As the word goes, misrepresentation. Misrepresentation is a misstatement of fact, and it exists where the person is making a statement knowingly wrong. You can see this definition written before you. The word representation means a statement of fact made by one party to the other. Means statement of fact. This is very important to note. A statement of fact made by one party to the other before or at the time of making the contract with regard to some matter essential to the contract, with intention to induce the other party to enter into a contract. A representation, when wrongly made either innocently or intentionally, is called misrepresentation. Now here I may elaborate this point further, that a person is knowing, innocently, mind it, a person if he is making a wrong statement of fact, unknowingly, innocently, even then it is misrepresentation. Then the intention is that he presents the facts in such a way that the other party believes it and he makes a contact. The party who is making the offer, he is assertive about a fact, and which he either knows that it is not true, or he does not know that it is true. Or where there is a, for example, I say that I have a car and it runs 10 kilometers in 1 liter, actually which is not so. So I am making, and suppose I don't know it, I am really making the statement unintentionally, unknowingly, and then the other party believes it, he makes and buys the car. I am guilty of misrepresentation. Here I have asserted a fact which is actually is not true, and I have made it innocently. Then secondly, where there is a duty breach of duty. For example, in case of insurance contracts, when the contract is made by the insurance company and the insured, then certain information is given, particularly about age. And in olden days, when people did not know about their age, there were no schools, no certificates, so they just used to say my age is so much. There it was actually a breach of duty. Their duty was to speak the truth, speak the fact, but they are making it innocently, and he tells a wrong date of birth or age, then there is a misrepresentation. So breach of fact, breach of duty. Thirdly, that the statement is made about the matter which is the core of the contract, about the subject matter. There was a case about this. A company advertised in a prospectus about certain activities, and they wrote that they have got the approval of the government to use certain type of gas. Actually, the approval was not taken, and it was understood that the approval will be given because it was a very routine matter, and they took it out for granted that the permission will be given, but approval was later not given. So here the directors were held guilty of misrepresentation. Here they innocently made a statement that the government has given them permission to use a gas particular type, but actually did not get it. They thought that it is a routine matter, they will get it. So to sum up, misrepresentation is a misstatement, is a wrong statement knowingly made, recklessly. Sometimes a person does not care what he is making and it relates to a fact, or innocently also. He makes a statement and he present the statement in such a way which is related to fact that the other party believes him and acts upon it, and thereby he enters into a contract. Closely related to this misrepresentation is fraud. Let us see what does fraud means. Fraud, definition of fraud. The fraud means and includes any of the following acts committed by a party to a contract, or by anyone with his connivance, or by his agent with intent to deceive another party thereto, or his agent, or to induce him to enter into the contract. Now here you start with the words. Fraud means and includes any one of the following acts which are committed by a party, or by with his connivance, or by his agent, which acts, in those acts which are intended to deceive. The major difference between misrepresentation and fraud, you will notice, is that the misrepresentation, the party believes the statement, acts upon it. But in case of fraud, the intention is to deceive the other party, and the other party believes the statement and suffers damages. One important element which is in case of fraud is that the party must suffer damages by believing the statement and acting upon it. In case of misrepresentation, if it is not so, if intention is there to deceive, but actually the party does not suffer any loss and damages, then it is misrepresentation, no fraud without damages, as the maxim of law goes. So let us see the differences between fraud and misrepresentation. First is, fraud is wrong statement is made intentionally, whereas misrepresentation is a wrong statement made innocently. You see the words, in case of fraud it is knowingly, intentionally, whereas in case of misrepresentation it is unknowingly, made innocently, without caring to its truth. Second is, the person making the wrong statement does not believe it to be true in case of fraud, whereas in case of misrepresentation the person making the wrong statement believes it to be true. See the word here. There, in case of misrepresentation, the point is belief. He is believing that the statement actually is true. Whereas in case of fraud, the wrong statement, he knows that, he believes that it is not true. So intention again is there. Then third, there is an intention to deceive. In case of misrepresentation, there is no intention to deceive. So therefore, in case of fraud, remember that in case of misrepresentation, the statement, in both cases, statement is made. Secondly, the statement in one case is made innocently, unknowingly, and in case of the other, the statement is made knowingly, intentionally. In case of fraud, the statement is presented in such a way that the other party believes it, and on believing it, he acts upon the statement. For example, if somebody is selling to you some, say, ring and say it is golden ring, and he knows that it is not golden ring, so he is making a wrong statement, a misstatement, knowingly. His intention is to deceive you. You believe his statement, thereby you act upon it. That is, you buy the golden ring, and then you suffer damages. But suppose it is golden ring, not golden ring, but he says that it contains some gold. You are not suffering some damages, some loss, then it is not fraud. So, but it is very rare. The person who wants to deceive you, well, naturally he will make a statement in such a manner that the statement will be believed by the other party. He will act upon it, and thereby he will enter into a contract. So, in case of fraud and in case of misrepresentation, two important elements the party has to prove in order to avoid the contract. Contract is voidable in case of both. In case of fraud, actually it is a crime also. Actually, the party with whom the fraud has been done, he not only can avoid the contract, contract is voidable, but also a fraud is a criminal act. The action can be taken against the person who has committed the fraud under Indian Penal Code. So it is a crime also. Misrepresentation is not a crime. The main thing is, therefore, to sum up between the two is that a statement is there in both cases. But in one case the statement is made knowingly, which is knows that it is wrong. Then misrepresentation case, the statement is made unknowingly, recklessly, unintentionally, without caring to its truth. Whereby in case of fraud, the party believes the statement. In case of misrepresentation also, the other party believes the statement is true. In both cases, fraud and misrepresentation, the other party believes the statement, acts upon the statement. and enters into a contract. But here in the last, when the party believes the statement and acts upon the statement, in case of fraud, the party must suffer loss, damages. In case of misrepresentation, loss is not to be proved that he has suffered a loss. And finally, in case of fraud, the fraud is crime also, whereas in case of misrepresentation, it is not a fraud. So far I have just told you about the flaws in the contract which render the consent not free, which can render the consent, which render the contract voidable are: number 1, coercion; number 2, undue influence; number 3, misrepresentation; and number 4, fraud. In all these cases, the contract is voidable.
So in all the 4 circumstances, the contract is voidable. It is at the option of the aggrieved party.
Yeah.
It has to prove that the contract is entered into on account of coercion or fraud or undue influence or misrepresentation.
Yes.
And one more thing I want to ask, in case of fraud, if a person keeps silent, just if the other party is asking something and he keeps silent, what does it mean?
Well, silence, silence does not amount to always consent. Sometimes if I say to you that if you don't speak, then I will presume that you agree. No. There are, the court will go into the circumstances where the person to whom any offer is made or acceptance, he has to give the acceptance, and one party says that if you keep quiet, if you keep silence, I will presume. You cannot presume like this unless it is the duty of the other party to speak.
No, if I say that if I am buying a car from some party and I ask does it run 60 km per hour, and he doesn't say anything, and I say I assume that it runs.
Now here it is his duty to speak, then it may amount
because
to,
it is the important part of clause of the contract.
Then it will amount to misrepresentation, and because it is his duty. But if the duty is not to speak, then you cannot just, and the man keeps silent, then you cannot just deduce from the circumstances that the consent has been obtained just by a person is keeping silent.
One more thing we have in our unit, the contract with the Pardanasheen women. That those women who do not mix with the society or they do not go out of the house, so they can come under undue influence. They cannot. What about the contract with them, with those women?
Actually, with Pardanasheen women nowadays it is not so. It is an old law that women remain. But if the woman is under, is a Pardanasheen lady, then all the intricacies must be explained to her. And if they are not explained, and she signs or she puts her thumb impression, then the contract will be regarded as if there is an undue influence or fraud or misrepresentation, the case may be. So Pardanasheen women usually when they enter into a contract, they are explained the intricacies of the contract when she is giving the consent. And if they are not explained to her and later on she says that no, they were not explained, then there may be a misrepresentation, or there may be undue influence. The relation between Pardanasheen lady and the other party may be such that the party may be in a position to dominate over the will of that Pardanasheen lady, and she may sign, enter into a contract, then consent is not free. But if the statement is made wrongly, there is a misrepresentation, a contract is being made with a Pardanasheen lady, and actually the person is not explaining fully, he is knowingly telling, making untrue a statement, his intention is to deceive, she signs, then she can take the plea of fraud. Or if other party is recklessly making a statement, then he is guilty of misrepresentation. So the law throws a special cloak, protection, in case of Pardanasheen ladies and minors. They protect, law protects them. And it cannot be, one thing more, it cannot be assumed that in case of a Pardhanasheen lady that undue influence was exercised or or misrepresentation was made. She has to prove it.
So burden of proof lies on the agreed party.
Agreed party.
The person who has
that Pardhanasheen lady in your question. Then any other point?
No, thank you.
Then we pass on to the last this point of flaw in consent, which is very important, section 20, about the mistake. Now mistake is not defined in the Act. So it means the meaning of the word mistake is what in general language we understand. As such it is not defined. Now mistake is divided into two groups: mistake of law and mistake of fact. Mistake of law can be further divided into two categories: mistake of law of domestic country, of home country, or mistake of law of a foreign country. About in general, the rule is mistake of law is no excuse. In case of any mistake which relates to law, person cannot say that he did not know law, even in case of uneducated or illiterate people. They cannot say that since they are illiterate, they don't know what is law. So he may be excused. No, mistake of law is no excuse in any case. In case of home country,
student can see the chart here.
Yeah.
Mistake of
fact.
The transparent. This slide can be shown to the students. Type of mistake, yes.
Yeah. This chart which is before you shows the different form of mistake, types of mistake. You see that on the top is mistake, then there is a mistake of law. Mistake of law is divided into mistake of Indian law or foreign law. Actually it should be mistake of law of home country, because we are Indian, that's why the word Indian is written for your convenience. Foreign law of foreign country. Then mistake of fact. Mistake of fact is related to, is of two types: bilateral and unilateral. Unilateral is one-sided, that is committed by one party only. Bilateral means the mistake is on the part of both the parties. Then the unilateral mistake is there are two exceptions, as we will point out later on, about the identity of a person and nature of a contract. In case of bilateral contract, the mistake of fact may arise in two circumstances: either it may relate to subject matter or possibility of mistake. Let me first again take you back to the mistake of law, and then we take mistake of fact. The mistake of law is no excuse. This is the rule. One is expected to know the law of his home country. Then the mistake of law of a foreign country may be excused. Because we are not expected to know the law of the whole world, that's why the excuse may be given to the party who has committed a mistake of law of a foreign country. Then coming to the other type of mistake, mistake of fact. Now mistake of fact actually cannot be defined, and it may relate to two cases. Either it may be unilateral or it may be bilateral. One thing I may let you know, that unilateral mistake is one-sided and the contract is valid, not void, not voidable. If I and you enter into a contract and mistake is on my part, not on your part, then suppose you have quoted the price, say rupees 60, and I take it as rupees 6. No, it is my mistake, not yours. One-sided, by unilateral. When there is a mistake on one party, on the part of one party, the contract is valid. The party cannot avoid the contract. They are bound to perform the contract. Then bilateral means two-sided. When both parties are at mistake of fact, then when both parties are mistake of fact, bilateral means 3 points you can see on the chart. Both the parties must be under a mistake. Then secondly, mistake must be of fact and not of law, and mistake must relate to an essential fact. You see in the bilateral mistake under the chart we have shown you, it is of two types, subject matter and possibility of performance. Then coming to the mistake of fact, bilateral mistake. In case of bilateral mistake under section 20, the contract is void because both parties are at mistake. Suppose I have two houses, one in Delhi and one in Bombay, and I say to you, I am selling my house. You think that I am selling the house of my house which is at Delhi, but I want to sell my house which is at Bombay. So later on, when we agree and form a contract, later on I also find, you also find, that I was saying to you I am selling house of Bombay and you thought that you are buying a house at Delhi. So both of us are at a mistake, the contract is void. But suppose if I am saying that I want to sell my house at Bombay and there is some other reason because of some mistake on your part, then the contract is valid. You cannot escape from them. So remember the difference between mistake on the one hand and other elements which make the contract, which make the consent not free, which are flaw in contract, that is coercion, undue influence, then misrepresentation or fraud. The contract side are voidable. But in case of mistake, the contract as in general, as a rule, is not voidable. If it is a mistake of fact and it relates to one party, contract is valid. If it relates on the part of both the parties, then contract is void. Now we take when the mistake of fact may arise in what circumstances. Mistake of fact may relate either to the subject matter of contract. Subject matter of contract means what? Subject matter of the contract means the thing, the matter, the exact solid thing or the thing about which you want to enter into a contract. Just I gave you an example of a house. I want to sell my house of Bombay, and you want to buy, you think that I am selling the house at Delhi. Then there is a mistake on the part of both of us. Here in this our contract, what is the subject matter? Subject matter is house. So the house is the subject matter. In case of mistake of fact, the mistake on the part of both the parties must relate to the subject matter. Now what type of mistake may arise in case of subject matter? There are many reasons when the mistake may arise in case about the subject matter, about its price, quantity, and about the existence. There are many, let me take you them one by one. Subject matter about the contract, as I told you, subject matter means the thing about which the contract is being made. Now, about subject matter, what mistake may arise? We take one by one. Mistake as to the existence of the subject matter. That is, we enter into a contract. I am an importer. I have imported goods from outside, and they are on the ship still, or they have been. The ship has landed at Bombay, and the goods are being taken delivery by my agent, and they are in the warehouse. I in Delhi make a contract with a person that my goods are being imported, and we enter into a contract. I show him the sample, he agrees to buy. Now in the meantime, what happens that the goods which I have imported, they are destroyed by fire or by water, something happens, tsunami may be there, any reason, the subject matter does not exist. I don't know about it, mind it. It is that I am also believing that it exists. So if the mistake is about the existence of the subject matter, that and actually does not exist, there is a contract will be rendered useless because of mistake, because the subject matter of contract does not exist. Second circumstance, when mistake of fact which relates to subject matter may arise, is about the identity of the subject matter. There are 2 or 3 types of goods lying, and I want to sell one thing and you want to buy some other thing, but you cannot identify, there is a confusion. As I gave you the example of house of Bombay and Delhi, the identity is not there. Or even in case of otherwise, suppose there is a bulk in sale of goods, you may have read or you may read that when there is a heap of, say, wheat is lying and I want to buy some quantity out of it, then the man takes it out. My goods are identified, I are ascertained. The goods cannot be identified, then there is a mistake of identity of subject matter. So I am identifying in case of house, I am thinking that I am selling Bombay house, you are thinking you are buying Delhi house. There is a mistake as to the identity of the subject matter. Then the contract will be rendered useless. It will be void contract, because the matter relates to subject matter and subject matter is not clearly identified. Then the second is title of the subject matter. Title of the subject matter means that I think that I am the owner of some goods, but actually I am not the owner of the goods. Then it may be such that the title is not mine, but I am thinking, or it may relate to quantity or quality or price. Lastly, one point must be noted. In case of unilateral mistake, the contract is valid except in 2 cases. When there is a mistake as to the person contracted with, or when the mistake is about the nature of the contract. Say for example, mistake of person contracted with, there is a famous case of Said versus But. A person, cinema owner did not allow a person to enter into a contract, into cinema hall. The man sent his friend to buy a ticket, and after buying the ticket by his friend, he went in, but he was prevented. He filed a suit. The court held that no, the contract was to be made with the person who bought the ticket, not the other person who sent him to buy the ticket. There is a mistake as to the identity of the person. Secondly, the impossibility of performance. The contract may become impossible because of some reason or the other. Then it may be difficult for the person to identify it.
Thank you, Dr. Tyagi. Thank you very much for the very simple and detailed discussion on free consent. I think our student must have understood the concept of free consent as one of the important element of the valid contract. We just close this session here, and we will again come after 15 minutes for another session, but the topic will be on company law, public company versus private company.